Hi, my name is Juliana Kakano, and my nutrition controversy is about the irradiation of food. Hi, my name is Juliana Kakano, and my nutrition controversy is about the irradiation of food. What is food irradiation? Food irradiation is a technology created for improving microbiological safety, storability of foods, and killing germs that could cause foodborne illnesses. Specifically, it is the use of gamma rays, X-rays, and ultraviolet rays. Gamma rays are useful for reducing viral load and inhibiting fungal growth. X-rays are used to reduce E. coli and Salmonella. Ultraviolet rays have shown positive results in preservation of fruits and vegetables and enhancing antioxidants. This process will target a substance and help the inhibition of sprouting, and that is when foods like potatoes begin growing sprouts, which shows it's becoming unable to be eaten. Parasite disinfection. It will improve shelf life, which is how long an item remains usable or fit for consumption, and works at reducing microbial populations in food items. According to the CDC, the process of food irradiation happens after the food is produced and packaged. First, the food arrives at the irradiation facility. At the facility, the food rides on a conveyor belt through the irradiation chamber. The food then passes under a beam of radiation where the germs are killed by breaking the bonds that hold them together. When the food leaves the chamber, most of the harmful bacteria is destroyed. This food can then leave the facility and be placed in grocery stores. According to the CDC, the process of food irradiation happens after the food is produced and foods that are included the most within the irradiation process are fruits. Foods that are included the most within the irradiation process are fruits, vegetables, chicken, turkey, beef, pork, shellfish, spices, and other seasonings. This is an important measure to take in food safety because it helps reduce contamination and foodborne illnesses. Although this is a tested and approved method, it is still important to wash produce and cook meats thoroughly. On the next slide is a quick video from the International Atomic Energy History of Food Irradiation. Irradiation of food began over 100 years ago. The idea of using radiation techniques to preserve food was followed by Henry Becquerel's discovery of radioactivity in 1895, where it was then published in a German medical journal. As more studies were done, the process of food irradiation became more feasible, and as a result, more research into the safety of the applications began to take place. Around the 1950s, reports of successful experiments in the United States traveled to other nations and countries like Belgium, Canada, France, and Russia. With some skepticism, 24 countries created the Internal Project of Food Irradiation, or the IFIP, in 1970. The Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, the Food and Agricultural Organization, the FAO, and the World Health Organization, WHO, were also involved. From this, regulations were developed, as well as international approvals and labeling. Food irradiation has come a long way since the early 1900s and is the most researched process in all of food processes. Although it is deemed safe, there are still consumers who are skeptical about this process. The following are some controversies about the topic. Since food irradiation involves using radiation, consumers are skeptical about the safety of it. Some concerns presented in the article, Counterpoint of Food Irradiation by Donald B. Loria, are chromosomal damage and nutritional damage as a result of the irradiation. To focus on the chromosomal damage aspect of food irradiation, 2 studies were conducted, one in India and one in China. In 1970, an Indian study was conducted. Here, malnourished children were fed ordinary wheat and wheat that was stored and irradiated. Those who ate the irradiated wheat showed chromosomal breaks that were not found in the other children. This study was criticized because of the small sample size and the methods that were used. A decade later, a similar but longer study was conducted in China. Conclusions yielded the same as the one in India. Again, it was a somewhat flawed study, but the results are still concerning. More research has been done since then, and it is now deemed that it does not cause chromosomal damage. The nutritional damage is also an important issue brought up by consumers. According to Loria, there are plenty of studies that show vitamin loss after irradiation. This is dependent on what kind of food and the amount of radiation being used. This raises questions because advocates say the loss is not significant. Loria makes the point that there are many people that live in poverty that have trouble getting adequate nutrition without being fed foods with deliberately reduced vitamin content. He is taking into consideration the trade-off of longer shelf lives and less contaminated foods, but they are less nutritious. He also adds that not everyone can have access to other supplements to replace the loss of vitamins. Loria does take into perspective the benefits of irradiation in contexts like imported fruits and vegetables and enhancing the safety of deli meats, but strongly advocates against it and insists on caution and limited use. A counterpoint of this argument is presented by the CDC. They stated that nutrition loss during irradiation is similar to the amount of nutrients lost during cooking, freezing, canning, and other food safety methods. There are also regulations in place for how much radiation can be used for the foods. This helps limit the nutritional damage and keeps for safer levels for the consumer. There are also misconceptions that are debunked by the CDC about the food becoming radioactive. They stated that eating irradiated foods does not expose you to or contaminate you with radiation or radioactive materials. They explain it like getting an X-ray at the hospital because you also do not become radioactive. Here are some controversies continued. In the article, as long as it's not irradiated, influencing factors of U.S. consumers' acceptance of food irradiation, the researchers Barrett and Segrist completed 2 studies to analyze consumers' reactions to different food decontamination strategies and the reasons for consumers' negative reactions to food irradiation. The first study was a 4x5 mixed experimental design. Here, 184 participants took part in the study and looked at foods labeled with terms like treated with ionization and treated with irradiation. And they had to rate each of the food by perceived quality. Terms associated with the ratings were unhealthy or healthy, disgusting or inviting, and unnatural or natural. The results showed a decline in quality perception for foods labeled with treated with irradiation, compared to no label or other decontamination strategies. These findings suggest that there is a stigmatized consumer view towards special decontamination labels, especially of those with radiation in it. In the second study, 65 participants completed a questionnaire about nuclear power relating to the quality perception of foods labeled with treated with irradiation. The participants were presented with foods with labels and without labels. The results showed that more negative thoughts towards nuclear power related to irradiated foods having lower quality. The implications of this study include the emphasis on the importance of terminology in communicating with consumers about the decontamination methods of their food. This experiment highlights these stigmatized views and hopes to fix it in the future. It is important to address consumers' concerns and increase acceptance of new technology. Overall, this is an important study for knowing consumer behaviors. If the consumers think their product is harmful from the label, then sales will clearly go down. This insight also allows companies to better their education of irradiation to the public. With better knowledge, consumers will not think the food is toxic and be more likely to buy it. Along with that, the controversies discussed are valid for consumers to have. We live in a time where people like to know what is happening to the products we consume and how they will affect our bodies. We also think of radiation being bad, so hearing it being used on foods can be a turnoff for many people. I am a firm believer that too much of something is not good. However, with the given research and statements from the CDC, FDA, and the WHO, irradiation seems to be safe for consumers to consume. The following are various viewpoints on irradiation of food. Public opinion is clearly split about this topic. Within food irradiation, there are political, clinical, cultural, and social factors that shape these public viewpoints. Politically, government regulations can impact consumers' views. The FDA and European Food Safety Authority, or the EFSA, provide set standards and regulations for food irradiation. These standards show how much radiation can be used for certain products. There are also some governments that actively promote and support food irradiation, whereas others have reservations due to political ideologies and public pressure. Clinical factors include proper research studies and risk assessment. The more research that is done by verified sources, the more likely consumers are to support a process. If all the results yield positive outcomes, people will be more likely to trust the irradiation. However, there needs to also be clear standards for sharing information that may be negative. That way, there's good communication to the public. If companies can post their clinical assessments of irradiation, it will create a better atmosphere. On the next slide are screenshots of some of the regulation codes of the irradiation of food. Here's an example of one of the regulation codes. This one is the Code of Practice for Radiation Processing of Food. As you can see, there's an introduction with some mission statements, the objectives, scope, use, and definitions. Some of these definitions include food irradiation, irradiated food, dosimetry, dose distribution, dose limit. There's also pre-irradiation treatments. There's handling, storage, and transport, specific packaging, the establishment, design, facilities, and control, design and layout, the controlling of the operation, which includes legislation, requirements for staff, requirements for process control, control of applied dose, product and inventory control, and then some general information about irradiation, which is the regulations for process determination, dosimetry systems, dosimetry and process control, records of irradiation, control of hazards, post-irradiation storage and handling, and labeling. All of these things are important to make sure that everyone using irradiation is on the same page. That way, it lessens some controversy for the public. Various viewpoints continued. Cultural and social factors go hand in hand. There are traditions and perceptions that people have due to their awareness, education, and public advocacy. In some cultures, traditional food processing methods are ingrained deeply, so the use of new ones will always be met with skepticism and vice versa. Also, those who prioritize food safety are more likely to support irradiation, where people who prioritize natural foods will be more skeptical of this technology. Along with clinical trials, if the public is more aware of the years of testing that is being done, it will help with the overall education of this topic. With the given facts, people can then make the best decision for themselves on what they decide to eat. There are always campaigns going on about controversial topics like these, but sometimes it is best when the consumer does their own research so they are not influenced by outside sources. This slide contains the future of food irradiation and some ethics. After doing this research, it is clear that organizations like the FDA, the WHO, and the CDC, and other international sites are doing their part in making sure we, the consumers, feel safe with the process of irradiation. There are always going to be skeptical people of this process, but that also happens with everything. There can also be more advocacies done by these organizations to help to get their results more known to reduce this skepticism. To add to this, according to the Code of Practice for Radiation Processing of Food, proper labeling must be done to keep transparent communication with the consumers. Finally, and ethically, the regulations should also be updated and reevaluated every now and then to make sure the data still stands true. I thought this was an interesting topic because it was something I did not know about beforehand. Overall, it is important for consumers to know what they are consuming, so I can see where skepticism can come from. However, after doing my own research, it seems like the big health organizations are willing to go above and beyond to show the safety of food irradiation methods. This is also something that is not being forced on people because we still have the choice to choose foods that have not been affected by this process. This is clearly done through the labeling. After doing the research, however, I am choosing the side that it is safe to consume and should not be a big worry. Although there is some depletion in nutrients, there's no overall negative effects of consuming irradiated foods. It is also great to see that there are non-chemical options to making food safer, less contaminated, and able to last longer. I believe everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but with this project alone, it really showed me the importance of doing your own research on topics that are important to you and your body. The following are my references from various journal articles and websites. Thank you for listening.